the radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yoram Brooks Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yoram Brooks Show on this Sunday night, evening. Hope everybody's had a great weekend. I certainly have, although I'm tired tonight. I don't know. It's been an exhausting day of doing very little. A lot of exercise, push-ups, stuff like that. But other than that, very little, and yet I'm exhausted. All right. Today, we're going to be talking about nationalism. We're going to do a recap of the recent discussion that we had on the Lex Fridman show with Yoram Hazony. If you remember, I did a debate with Yoram Hazony at the University of Texas in Austin a month or so ago, and then the next day we went into Lex Fridman, who is in Austin. We went to his apartment studio and taped a conversation about our debate, about a variety of different issues, about the stuff that Lex Fridman asked us about. And that, I think we were in the thing for about 3.5 hours. Lex has just put up the video. It's about a 3-hour video of our conversation. And he's got a bunch of clips that are coming out. So if you go to Lex Clips, there's a bunch of clips from the conversation we had. So there's a lot going on coming out of that conversation. As always happens, subscribers to the Yoram Brooks channel have gone up, not as much, not as dramatically as in past Lex Fridman appearances, because they already know who I am, I guess, but it's still significant relative to our usual clip of new subscribers. A bunch of new people have joined. Maybe some of you are on right now to talk. I have to admit that I don't remember what we talked about for 3 hours. I don't remember all the nuance and everything we talked about. But I want to talk, so I want to focus today on a couple of things. I thought I'd talk more broadly about my views on nationalism, what it is, and why I'm opposed to it, so what the meaning of it is. And then I want to link that up to a conversation about birth rates, which Yoram Hazony made a big deal out of in the Lex Fridman interview, I think also in the debate, and just I know that this is an issue, a big issue for kind of the national conservative movement and the whole variety of different nationalists or conservatives out there who care a lot about birth rates. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about birth rates and whether one should care about birth rates, and if one cares, what one should do about them, and what do they reflect, and what do they mean, and all of that kind of stuff. And is the West in demographic decline, and does this mean that we're all going to die, and whatever. We can talk about any of that, and I'm happy to take any of your questions on any issue, of course, but in particular issues related to or issues that came out of the conversation with Lex Fridman. Gene says, Lex interview so good. Loved the part where you say you wanted people to be moral, not because it's simply tradition, but because they understand why it's good. Thank you. Absolutely. You don't want people to be moral out of ignorance. You want people to be moral because they know it's good for them to be moral. Generally, you want people to know why they do the things that they do and have a good reason for doing the things that they do. Hopefully you guys will enjoy the interview. Please watch it. Please share it. Please share the clips. I know it's so hard for you guys to share stuff. Generally, objectivists, fans of Ayn Rand, are really, really, really bad at sharing things. But I'd really appreciate if you did. The more views we get on these Lex Fridman videos, the more he'll invite me back, the more we'll be able to do. So please consider sharing the interview. It's already up to, I don't know, I think 70,000 or something like that. So it's going to get a lot of views. Hopefully we can get it up to 200,000-300,000 views for the interview. That's what the previous ones, although the one with Malice I think was even more than that, maybe 400,000-500,000. So yeah, let's get the numbers up. The more people watch it, the more people exposed to the ideas I represent, and the more people land up reading Ayn Rand, the more people are influenced by the philosophy that animates me and I think many of you. So hopefully everybody has a good incentive to watch the Lex Fridman interview. So that's on Lex Fridman's channel. Go now, and again, share it, please, and like it, and put on some good comments. One of the really cool things about it is the number of positive comments Lex got, and I think that's because Lex is such a good interviewer, and I think he just allows people to speak, and it really flows well, and he asks good questions. But the interview is getting rave reviews in the comment section for the most part. So I think that's super exciting. If we can have more intellectual debates, discussions, right, where you're actually talking to one another and not yelling at one another. So big fan of what Lex Fridman is doing, and again, I hope you guys support that by watching it. Adam says the interview was good, but he made way too many strawman argument. You and Malice was better, but still good to see more of your discussions. I mean, you have to be careful about this issue of strawmanning. Yes, it feels like everybody strawmans my arguments. Even Malice often strawmans the objective's position on ethics. He often strawmans Ayn Rand. But what do we mean by strawmanning? Do we mean that people don't understand the position and therefore are attacking a false understanding? Do we mean that they are purposefully misrepresenting the ideas? I think most people are not doing it on purpose, and I don't think Yoram Hazony is doing it on purpose. I think that these ideas are different. They're hard. They're hard because they're completely outside the framework of what anybody else thinks and anybody else presents. It's very hard for them to grasp individualism in the context of egoism, in the context of the trader principle. I mean, this is the genius of Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand is the first thinker to put all this together. So the fact that most intellectuals out there in the world don't understand her, don't get it, don't integrate it, and therefore come to the debate with a lack of understanding of her ideas is not surprising. And it's strawmanning looking from the outside, but I don't think it's strawmanning on purpose, is my point. I don't think people do it on purpose. I think it's people don't understand, and therefore they present your position in a false way, not because, again, they're doing it on purpose, but because I don't think they understand your position. This is the best they can do. So, while I think that it's opposition is often misrepresented, opposition is often argued against from the, assuming we believe X when we believe Y. But I think most of it is benevolent in the sense that most of it just comes from a lack of the other side understanding and knowing. Scott says Hazony isn't the enemy. Hazony's ideas are definitely the enemy. There's no question Hazony's ideas are the end of America as we know it. They are the end of freedom. They're the end of capitalism. the end of liberty, the end of the vision of the founding fathers for the country. So those ideas, the ideas of national conservatism, which Hazony is at the forefront of that movement, are absolutely the enemy, and I think a potent enemy. He knows, I think that, and I know he thinks I'm the enemy. That's okay, right? I mean, I think both Yoram and I are honest enough to know that we fundamentally disagree about the role of the state, the role of government, the purpose of life, the purpose of individual action, the moral purpose of life, what the good is and what evil is, where we get our authority from. I'm all authority. His is from God. It's unequivocally from God. His source is the Old Testament. Mine's not. So absolutely, we know that from an ideological perspective, we are the enemies. Doesn't mean we can't be friendly. I like him, but his ideas are destructive, and he thinks my ideas are destructive, and that makes complete sense. There is no one common enemy. I mean, that is how you get that's how you get the communist takeover of Russia. The Tsar is the enemy, so let's all unite. Yes, let's all unite to fight the Tsar, and you forget who you're uniting with. Let's all unite to fight the communists, and you get Hitler. No, there is no one enemy. There are lots of enemies. And the oversimplification of this one enemy, even in a particular time context, the oversimplification of that is the death of your actual cause. Wokeism is dying already. Wokeism is already dying. It's on his death knell. All right. Adam says, agree the strawman arguments weren't on purpose. Lack of family and Atlas Shrugged argument was a good example. He didn't understand it's just a book and not the guide for all objectivist philosophy or for all living. But lots of people use the family argument about Atlas Shrugged. I see it all the time. And I don't think it's necessarily dishonest, particularly from coming from the perspective of somebody who believes that family is the be-all, end-all of everything. And Micah says, I don't think objectivism is hard. People who don't get it are either intellectual, dishonest, or unthinking. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's true. There's a sense in which objectivism is not hard, but there's a sense in which objectivism is very hard, in the sense in which objectivism goes against everything else in the culture. The sense in which objectivism is turning the moral code that has been drilled into people for the last 2,000 years on its head, to the extent that objectivism demands of you a certain metaphysics and epistemology of reality, of reason, when everything you are taught and everything in the culture, or at least a lot of it, is opposed to that. That's the sense in which it's hard. It's hard to adopt. It's hard to understand. It's hard to comprehend, because your whole framework, your whole way of thinking is conditioned by a completely different ideology, different set of beliefs, different ideas. Once you accept reality and you accept epistemology, and you're willing to challenge conventional wisdom in terms of morality, once you have that, then yes, then I don't think it's hard. But if it wasn't hard, is it true that of the millions and millions of people who read Atlas Shrugged are just dishonest? I don't think so. I mean, there's a sense in which they're dishonest in that they're not willing to challenge all their previous beliefs, or they're cowards. Not to question their beliefs. But I think it's more likely that they're cowards or that they just can't think outside of the box. They just can't go there. I don't think that's immorality necessarily. All right. Somebody says I'd be interested to know what policies Hazony would have. I mean, would implement. I mean, I've heard other places where I think Hazony would do things like ban pornography, bring Christianity into the schools, institute school prayer, generally integrate religion into government and you know, abandon the idea of separation of state from church, which he doesn't believe was the intention of the fathers anyway. You know, I think he would be willing to intervene in the economy. For example, in the debate I did with him at the University of Texas, he said things like, to save jobs in America. He'd be willing to intervene in the economy, I think, to incentivize people to have more children. We'll get to that. He'd be willing to intervene in the economy to achieve what he or people like him or would believe is for the common good. Things like that. I mean, in that sense, he'd be willing to do what the left does just for right-wing causes. So, I mean, he'd be willing to have a national industrial policy, which is what the national conservatives advocate for at their conferences, which again are his conferences, in order to combat the threat, the economic threat from China, which means government favors, investments, subsidies, tariffs, trade restrictions, and all of that stuff in order to favor certain industries and penalize exports from other places and generally manage the economy in a way that is perceived to be, again, in the so-called common good. Todd, thank you. He says Hazony is frightening. I mean, Hazony's not frightening. He's a nice guy. But his ideas are frightening. His ideas are frightening. They should be frightening to anybody who values their freedom, to anybody who values your individualism, your ability to live your life by your standards, and anybody who believes that the purpose of government is to protect you and generally to leave you alone. Even if we disagree on the details, on the nuances of it, to everybody who believes in individualism, the ideas of national conservatism, the ideas of the new right more broadly, are frightening, scary. They are, in my view today, the enemy on the right. There's plenty of enemies on the left, and there are plenty of enemies on the right, and you can't take your eyes off of any one of the enemies. Because once and you cannot align with your enemies. It is a massive mistake to ally with your enemies. Ayn Rand warned us against it, and we should heed her warning. We need to fight on all fronts. We need to fight on all fronts. We can ally on particular issues, on a particular narrow thing, while clearly expressing the fact that we disagree on everything else, but it has to be narrow. Charlie says, nice podcast with legs. Any headway with debate with Yuval Harari? No, I mean, as far as I know, nobody is trying to get me a debate with Yuval Harari. I doubt we could afford him. And I don't know what venue would do it, but yeah, that would be amazing to do that. That would be a whole different level. Maybe Lex. Maybe we can ask Lex to put it together. The nice thing here is we had the debate at Texas, and then Lex capitalized on that. So what I need to do is more debates at the University of Texas, that Lex can then capitalize on for these purposes. All right, Mike. All right. Let me just take this Michael point, because I think it's an interesting one that leads us into where I want to take this. He says Hazony does a lot of mental gymnastics that justifies academic collectivism. I don't think it's collectivism is academic at all. As a Jew, he should know nationalism never ends well-faced people. But on the other hand, what does it mean to even say his people? Isn't nationalism the only solution for his people? Isn't that the perception? Didn't his people, in some sense, invent nationalism? Isn't a Jewish nation as a chosen people by God? The first nation clearly defined, with clearly defined borders given to them by God, thus linking nationalism with religion and with God. I mean, you could argue Egypt was a nation before, but did it have the same kind of unity, the same kind of ethnic, religious unity and exclusivity? And this is important. Brad, thank you. This is great. Brad says, great talk with Hazony. Very excited to see more debates with others in the future. Your passion is admirable. That's worth $100. Thank you, Brad. Really appreciate it. So this is the thing about Hazony coming from a Jewish context. If you take a Jewish context, nationalism, you can argue, is the only solution for Jews as a response to anti-Semitism, on the one hand. Nationalism is what, combined with religion, is what kept the Jews a whole, a unit, while they were spread all over the world, little communities everywhere. It wasn't just their religion. As part of the prayers, the Jewish prayers, one says often, maybe even every Friday night, if I remember right, when you're not living in Israel, as part of the Jewish prayers for the last 2,000 years, you say next year in Jerusalem. And the idea here is not, yeah, I'll take a trip. The idea here is that next year we will reestablish our state, our nation in Jerusalem. Judaism has always been a combination of religion with a nation that has been dispersed, a nation that was kicked out of its homeland, but a nation that has always striven to go back to its homeland. And indeed, again, if you go back to the Old Testament, God views the Jews, God qua the story, right? You know me, I'm an atheist. God views the Jews as a nation that's going to occupy a particular space, a nation dedicated to him. So nationalism and Judaism has always gone hand in hand. And again, in many respects, that kind of nationhood, nationalism, maybe the Jews are the first ones to have it. Every time the Jews are defeated and scattered, even in the Old Testament, they always come back to a particular place, a particular piece of land, a particular people. Jews are also very particular about who can join their nation. So, and this is the big difference, and we'll get to this in a minute, between a significant difference between myself and Yoram, and this relates to Birthrates. Judaism is not a universalist religion, and it is not a universalist culture, and it is not a universalist nation. Only certain people are Jews. Only certain people can become Jews, and becoming a Jew is very difficult. You can't become a Jew by marrying a Jew. You can't become a Jew by just dipping yourself into a bunch of water and baptizing yourself or whatever. You can become a Jew just by declaring yourself a Jew, or just by studying the Old Testament, or just by wearing a yarmulke. Becoming a Jew officially requires real study, passing tests, being anointed as a Jew by a rabbi, by an official. Indeed, there's a whole question in Israel and among Jews, who indeed is a Jew? But if you're born a Jew, you are a Jew, whether you believe in God or not. So it's not exactly a religion. And the very religious Jews still consider you a Jew, even if you're an atheist, if you were born to a Jewish mother. And by the way, you're not a Jew if your mother was Christian. So the whole point, the whole thing about Judaism is it's a select, small number of people who are unique and special and have their own state. And Yoram Hazony talks about a nation is a combination of tribes. I mean, where does he get that? He gets that from the Old Testament, because the Jews were 12 tribes, and they united under one king and formed the Israelites, Israel, which was the original nation. But it's a nation of 12 tribes. And what Yoram is doing is he's extrapolating from Judaism to everybody. And he's saying, well, the Jews have a nation, the Jews are a combination of tribes, so this is what nationalism is, and this is good. And what Yoram cannot do, I don't think, is ask the question, well, is it good? Is it good for the Jews? A lot of them have died for this. What value is it in preserving this Jewish thing, this Jewish culture, this Jewish entity, this Jewish nation? Why? What for? And of course, if you want to preserve the Jewish nation, then you have to be super concerned about birth rates, because you can't have immigrants. Well, they went through hell for what? That's a good question. For what? What did they go through hell for? To preserve their collectivistic identity. Wouldn't the world be a better place if they hadn't? Or, preserve that collective identity, but preserve their individual identity? Now, you could argue there are a lot of good things about Jewish culture. But let's take the good things about Jewish culture and universalize them. And this is the point. I'm a universalist. Universalist. This is one big disagreement between myself and Yoram Hazony. I believe there are certain values, virtues, principles, ideas, philosophies that apply to everybody, every human being on planet Earth. Everybody has the capacity to reason. Everybody has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everybody should be left free to pursue their own values using their own minds. So, I am, and objectivism is a universalist philosophy. It's not a philosophy for a particular people in a particular place. It's a philosophy for all people, anyway, if they choose to adopt it, and they're willing to take on the responsibility to live it. It's not linked to particular history or to particular genetics. Tazy says no one came out of the Holocaust and said, I'm not a Jew. Many people did. Many people did come out of the Holocaust and say, I'm not a Jew. I'm an individual. They labeled me a Jew. And that's, Ayn Rand said, I'm only a Jew in the face of anti-Semitism. I'm only a Jew in the face of anti-Semitism. So yes, coming out of the Holocaust in the face of anti-Semitism, I'm a Jew. But many of those people then became completely secular and completely non-Jewish. Yeah, no, I get, I've talked about why I think Israel is a legitimate country and why I think anti-Semitism makes the nationalism, kind of in a sense necessary. But it's only necessary because we live in an irrational world. In a rational world, you would need the state of Israel. What was I saying? I was on a rant and it went away. Yes, I'm a universalist. So I don't care about birth rates. I have zero concern about birth rates. I don't care if a country is shrinking or not. Why? Why am I not concerned about the disappearance of Western civilization because of birth rates? Because Western civilization is not a particular number of people in a particular place at a particular time, and if those people die, and those people, if they don't reproduce enough, first of all, they can reproduce and the civilization will go away anyway. Because civilization doesn't get transferred in your genes. But because I know that those ideas can influence people who come in. I believe immigrants can be converted into your civilization. That the civilization can be exported to foreign lands. That the civilization itself does not depend on the genetic makeup of the people. That the civilization itself does not depend on the color of the skin. That the civilization itself, if it's a strong civilization, if it's a bold civilization, if it's a civilization of self-esteem, and if it's a civilization of truth, then it will convince others to adopt it. So you're not going to shrink. You don't worry about birth rates because anybody exposed to your civilization, if it's got the right self-esteem and it's got the right confidence and it's strong enough, will convert others. And this is a big difference, for example, between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Christians are not worried about birth rates because Christians intend to convert everybody who's not a Christian into Christian. That's the plan. Mormons are not concerned about birth rates. They're concerned about going out there and preaching and converting people to Mormonism. Muslims are not concerned about birth rates, even though birth rates in the Muslim world are plummeting, because their goal is to convert everybody to Islam. So it's a constant expansion. Judaism is concerned about birth rates, has to be concerned about birth rates, because it's not universalist. It doesn't, it's not trying to convert anybody. It doesn't want to convert anybody. So it's self-perpetuating or it's gone. And indeed, they believe that the only way to self-perpetuate it is through the genes, through babies, through having babies. I believe the way to perpetuate good ideas is through argument, it's through debate, it's through discussion. Not through genes. Your children are not necessarily going to agree with you. Somebody wrote me, you're going to lose because the religionists are having more babies than you. Yeah. But I'm not going to win based on babies and based on genetics. The only way for me to win is to convert those religionists to my position. I'm already a minority. And how did the Christians get so many people? Did they have just more babies than anybody else around them? No. They converted and converted and converted and converted. And my job is to convert people using reason. To reason, to a life of reason, to a life of rationality. And they can have as many kids as they want. I don't care. Am I worried about the decline of Western civilization? Absolutely. Why? Because Western civilization has lost its self-esteem. It's lost its confidence. It's lost its ability to convert people. It's surrendered. It's given up. Not because of genes, not because of immigration am I worried about Western civilization. Not because Westerners are not having enough babies. I'm worried about Western civilization because we don't believe in it strongly enough and are not willing enough to argue for it and to insist on people assimilating to it. Like, I have no concern about the United States being overrun by another civilization if, and this is a big if we believed in what America stands for, if we were willing to advocate for what America stands for, if we were willing to demand that people assimilate into what America stands for. And this is why, I did an event with Douglas Murray a while ago, and of course he's concerned about immigration into Europe, and I said, the problem with Europe is that it's committing suicide, not that it's being murdered from the outside. The immigrants are weak. They've got a stupid Middle Ages ideology. We should be able to overcome that like this. Within a generation or two, they should all be advocates of Western civilization, and they would be if we stood up for it, if we advocated for it, if we declared it to be universally good for everybody, if we taught it, if we try to convert them. We need to become evangelical. Evangelists in our beliefs in Western civilization, or in the case of objectivism and objectivism. We need to go out there and convert. Not by the sword, by the mind. As we said in previous shows, one mind at a time. Ideas shape history. Bad ideas win when good ideas are unwilling to fight, have given up on themselves. And in that sense, Rome committed suicide. The West is committing suicide. Don't blame the barbarians. They're just being barbarians. Blame the people who matter. Blame our intellectuals. And blame people on the right who are worried about birth rates, who are worried about the commitment to the nation rather than the commitment to ideas. And this is the thing about nationalism. I'm not against nations. I think nations are great. I said that on the show. I want quite a few of them. I think there are too many today, but I want quite a few of them. I want competition. I want to be able to leave my nation and go somewhere else if I don't like it. I want nations. I want strong nations. I also want free nations. And that's much more important to me than the ethnic characteristics or the history or the shared culture or shared religion. What I want is freedom. That's the most important cultural phenomenon. And if you had a bunch of free nations, then I'd believe in free immigration and let people move to where they feel most at home at, what they like the best, and compete on the culture. Try to convince people, try to convert people, evangelize to people. So I'm for nations, but I'm against nationalism. Because what is nationalism? Nationalism is the placement of the nation above the individual. It's the placement of the common good of the nation as more important than the good of the individual. Nationalism makes the individual, the servant of the state, ultimately the slave of the state. The state is the standard. The common good is the standard. The public welfare is the standard. And common good and public welfare, not as I understand it, which is individualism, individual rights, but as collectivists understand it, as some kind of adding up of utility functions, or more accurately, what the philosopher kings believe is good for society. And this now is the dominant view on the right. I talked about Vermeule at Harvard, Patrick Deneen, Sohab Amari, and Yoram Hazony, the whole national conservative movement, the whole new right, the other term they are using, not me, illiberal right. Illiberal means anti-freedom, individual liberty right, anti-individual liberty right. That's the new right. They want to place the state above you. They want to be in a position of authority to dictate to you what your values should be. I just read an article by Vermeule, the Harvard law professor who's about common good conservatism, who says, who should decide about questions of, I don't know, whether alcohol should be served, whether stores should be open on Sunday, things like that. Who is the authority? Should individuals decide? And clearly his answer is no. Then it's a question of, should the legislature decide, should the executive decide? You know, but it's one thing he opposes is individuals making decisions for themselves about how to live their lives. Yeah, I don't know, there might be some new people here, but I do answer all the Super Chat questions. I promise. It just, you know, first I rant, first I do my shtick, and then I get to all of them. And I usually get to them in priority of the dollars contributed, but I get to all the questions. I will answer all the questions. We live in a world today where the right is dominated, but I do not answer questions that are just asked in the chat. I only ask the questions that are part of the super chats. If you want to have your question answered, you can give $2. If you want your question answered, answer the question. If you want your question answered, use the super chat. You can use $5, you can use $2. Here's Frank using a $5 question. There is plenty of these opportunities to ask me, but don't do it in the chat itself because I can't follow the chat fast enough to answer your question. Plus, you know, we have a method here to the madness, and that is that to get me to answer your question, you have to put in $1 or $2, or 100, or 500, or 1,000. Or whatever you want. I think we're over 750 already, so this is pretty amazing. Amazing day. Thank you, guys. We'll get to some of the contributors who got us here. We got some big contributions. So I am an individualist. The moral purpose of life is to live your life pursuing your happiness. Politics is supposed to serve that. And the only way politics can serve that, the only legitimate way politics can serve your life as an individual, is to protect you, to keep you free. Military, police, judiciary, that's it. That's the role of the state. It's not to dictate your morals for you. It's not to provide you with a job. It's not to provide you with income. It's not to tell you to watch or not to watch pornography. It's not to tell you what to think. to protect you from fraud and criminals and let you use your judgment to pursue your values. And as long as you're not hurting other people, hurting in terms of violating their rights, the state has no business in your life. You want to screw your life up? While the purpose of rights is not for you to screw it up, you have every right to do so. The purpose of rights is to allow the rational, the good, to live their lives well. And in every aspect, we live today in a world that is unfortunately turning its back on individualism, and has been for a long time. And to some extent, you could argue, and I think it's true, that we've never been individualistic any more than just like we've never been capitalist. Not fully, not consistently. But that's what I'm fighting for. Fighting for individualism, fighting for freedom, fighting for the ability and the right to live your life based on your judgment, and fighting for capitalism, the separation of state from economics, which is just application of that principle to the realm of property rights, to the realm of economic activity. And individualism doesn't care about ethnicity. It doesn't care about your genes. It doesn't care about your color of your skin. Individualism is about you live your life, I live my life. I don't care. I'll treat you based on your moral character, based on your ability in a particular context. I'll treat you based on how we interact. So I don't care about birth rates. And I only care about the nation in whether it is protecting my rights. How good of a job is it doing in protecting those rights? And I'll just say, I did the show yesterday about Russia and Putin. And that applies for foreign policy. We have a lousy foreign policy because we try to intervene in the world. We try to use force on other people with no clear goal. We have no real confidence. We send our young men to die for no good reason. We're altruists in that we place often the lives of our enemies that are more important than the lives of our own people. The military and our foreign policy should be individualistic. It's not. I know. It should be focused on protecting the lives and property of Americans. And that would mean we don't fight in Ukraine. It would mean we're not going to fight for Taiwan. It would mean we should get our troops out of South Korea and let them defend themselves. It would mean an individualistic foreign policy, which is very, very rare and very, very unusual. It had a period in America between World War I and World War II where Americans were committed to not intervening again in a European war. But once Pearl Harbor happened, that was finished. And since then, the idea of American foreign policy and American troops being focused on defending America, and that's it, just doesn't exist. So as I said, I'm against nationalism because it places the nation above the individual. I'm not against the nation. I'm very much for a nation state. And I'm against any focus, any attention to birth rates. I'm very much for a focus and an insistence on ideas, on assimilation, on pride and confidence and commitment to the good ideas that America represents, that Western civilization represents. All right. Again, if you want to ask a question, happy to answer your questions, guys. But there is a super chat feature in YouTube, and that's on this show. That's how you ask a question. You can do it with just a trivial amount. I know many of you don't have money or don't want to support me that much. That's fine. But you can use this guy. Dean is using shekel to do it. Dean said he sent me $20 on PayPal. You can even make the contribution on PayPal. Why didn't you do it here, Dean? It's hard for me to navigate all the different places you guys. Yeah, there it is. I see it. And the question. All right. I'll ask that. I'll get to that in a little while. All right. Let's see. What are we going to do now? Brad mentions this quote I had at the Lex debate. I forgot about this. I'm a lover, not a fighter. I fight so I can love. I like that quote. That's like a T-shirt worthy quote, don't you think? I wonder if that's completely original to me. But I don't know. If Action Jackson's out there, maybe that's a good one to put on a T-shirt. We can make it a one of the Yoram Brook Show T-shirts. I'm a lover, not a fighter. I fight so I can love. Am I the only one who likes that quote? All right, let's see. We're going to go through some of these questions. Let's see. We've got Corey from Australia with $100. I think it's about $100. If what I am seeing in the chat is correct, and Hazony does justify tribalism due to human naturally tribalistic, could this be viewed as the primacy of consciousness, the collective consciousness? The metaphorical fact remains that human are individuals. Metaphysical fact, not metaphorical fact, are individuals. Yes, absolutely. I think that religion generally, all religion, and remember, Yoram Hazony is very religious. He wears a yarmulke like Ben Shapiro. And religion, by necessity, is primacy of consciousness. It says that a consciousness is before existence, and that a consciousness can change and manipulate existence. And how do we know this? Is there anything in the metaphysical world that gives us evidence of the existence of this consciousness? No. We know this because of the primacy of our own consciousness. So religion is necessarily a primacy of consciousness phenomena. And it is quite tribalistic. It is quite tribalistic. Tribes are almost always primacy of consciousness, because tribes, the whole point of a tribe is to negate your existence as an individual. Well, what is the best way to negate your existence as an individual? It's to negate your mind. It's to negate your reason. It's to negate your connection to reality. It's to invalidate your senses. It's to make you dependent on another source of knowledge. The primacy of consciousness rather than primacy of reality, of existence. And because once you've abandoned your reason, then how do you know what to do? How do you know how to behave? How do you know Well, you need guidance. And that's where the people with power, that's where the witch doctor and Attila come in, providing you with guidance, explaining to you what you should do, how you should behave, how you should live, who you should live with, what you can and cannot do. And whether that tribalism happens to be in the form of statism or in the form of some kind of religion, but the essence of tribalism is you are not an independent agent. You do not have agency. You are not independent to act on your own behalf in pursuit of your own life, in pursuit of your own value. You follow orders of one sort or another. You follow orders. You do what you're told. Whether that telling is in a book written thousands of years ago, or whether that telling is from the Fuhrer right now. It places somebody else's consciousness above yours, somebody else's ideas above yours, somebody else's values above yours. And you just have to go along. That's the essence of tribalism. And at the end, that's the essence of nationalism. Whoops, what did I do there? I deleted something I didn't want to delete. All right, Todd says, for $100, he says, I'm an individual. Yes, you are. And you all are. And everybody is, whether they are willing to acknowledge it or not. We are all individuals. And a nation is just a collection of individuals. A tribe, even a formal tribe, is just a collection of individuals. Any public, any common, any group is a collection of individuals. The primary, the metaphysical primary, is the individual. And therefore, what we should be focused on, what we should be interested in, is the individual. His values, his mind, his actions. And if you really, really value the individual, then you want that individual to be free to make his own choices. Brad asks, for $99.99, does population of a nation even matter if the nation is rational, has objective law? It doesn't. It doesn't matter. Now, you know, we can talk about birth rates in terms of, I think, what declining birth rates represent and what they mean and why birth rates are declining and why I think they're declining in the West so as much as they are. But it doesn't matter, right? There is no such thing as a birth rate. It's how many kids are you going to have? How many kids do you have? How many kids do you want? What are your values with regard to kids? 0? Fine. 6? Fine. 3? Fine. As long as you have made that decision using, rationally. Most people who have, many kids are not doing it rationally. They're doing it out of a sense of duty. That's why very religious communities are the communities that have the most kids. Not because they enjoy kids more than anybody else, not because they value children more than anybody else, but because they have a duty to have kids. They are commanded to have kids, and they follow the commandments. Again, negate their own judgment. Negate their own values. Do what you are told. Now, why do you think some cultures have more kids than others? Well, I mean, traditionally, poor cultures have had more kids than others. Because many of the kids have died at childhood or young. That's why it's still true in Africa that they have a lot of kids, although birth rates in Africa are declining. Birth rates across the entire world are declining. By 2050, I think population of the earth will peak, and then we'll start declining from there. Because as people make more money, they rely less on children to work. Children have always worked, right? They rely less on children to take care of them when they're old. And as they get richer, as they become more individualistic, they discover they have time for themselves. They discover they have values they want to pursue for themselves, that their happiness is not only tied to family, that their happiness is not only tied to children, that there are other options, there are other things they could be doing. As you get wealthy, you have more time to think, you have more time to pursue values, you have more time to consider what your values are. So free societies, wealthy societies, have fewer children than unfree societies. And particularly unfree societies where the duty is to have children. And poor societies. Daisy, thank you for the support. Apollo, thank you for the support. But why are we having so few kids? I mean, it's hard to tell exactly, but I do think that a lot of this has to do with a general pessimism that exists in the Western world today. If you think the world is going to hell, if you think global warming is going to destroy the planet, if you think human beings are just horrible, if you think Muslims are going to take over Europe and there's no point in trying otherwise, if you think life just generally sucks because that's what Albert Camus told you, if you think the economy is in decline, if you think that you're not making enough money to live, if you think you're getting poorer, if you think the future is bleak for whatever reason possible, you're unlikely to have kids. Pessimism, a negative view of the future, is definitely a reason not to have children. And I think one that is dominating the Western world today. We live in a time of pessimism. I mean, is Greta going to have kids? Probably not. Greta, the global warming Greta. In places where people think that they have very little opportunities financially in the future, are they going to have kids? Probably not. Israel is a unique place because Israel, even completely secular Israelis, are having kids. They're above replacement rates. Todd, thank you. That's amazing. Israel is the only country in the West, the only developed country that is above replacement. I mean, significantly above replacement if you include all the religionists. But even among secularists, and I think that the reason for that is that Israel generally is optimistic. They defeated their enemies. They've won the wars. The real existential threat to the state of Israel from their neighbors is gone. They're becoming rich. There's a high-tech boom, particularly among the secularists. They're living a good life. And I think there's a certain optimism and positivism in Israel that just doesn't exist elsewhere in the West. Todd, thank you. Wow, another $100. We're at 900 and almost 960. That's pretty amazing. You guys are amazing. Thank you. Thank you for all the support. People are not that interested in the future. By the way, in Israel, marriage is being delayed as well, significantly. And yet birth rates are up as compared since 1992. Birth rates are up and marriage is being delayed even further. And with technology today, women can have children into their 40s. So no, it's not late marriage. It's not just women having careers. Although, yeah, that would lower birth rates, and that's a good thing. And generally, again, I don't care about birth rates. Some people don't want to have kids. Great. Doesn't matter. But pessimism. I think is the dominant thing that lowers birth rates. I think Scandinavians are less pessimistic generally, and as a consequence, they have slightly more children than Southern Europeans. You know where the places that have the least children are? Italy and Spain, Russia, and Japan. Now in Japan, I'm not sure what it is, because I don't know enough about the culture to say. Anyway, that's my hypothesis. I can't prove it. Granted, it's just a hypothesis. I think birth rates are related to levels of pessimism in the culture. Economic pessimism, cultural pessimism. Italy and Spain have economic pessimism, particularly after the financial crisis. Birth rates plummeted. By the way, COVID. I don't know if you know, if you've read about this, but birth rates during COVID have plummeted. And it's partially because the world sucks right now. And people look at it and it's depressing. And it's pessimistic. And what's going to happen in the future? How are we going to survive? And who wants to live in this? Lockdowns? Tessie and Apollo, thank you. Tazy. God, I need to get that right. On the other hand, when you look at a catastrophe like World War II, what happened to birth rates right after World War II? They went through the roof. Why? Because people were excited about the future. They'd beaten fascism. Communism did not look like a potent force. It was America that clearly dominated and won. And birth rates in America went through the roof. And then coming out of World War II, Europeans, the economy started revving up and things looked like they were going to be better in the future, and birth rates went up. That's the baby boom generation. So anyway, my view is that a lot of this has to do with pessimism. And you could argue whether pessimism is justified or not. I don't think it is. I'm still a rational optimist. But if you're pessimistic about the future, you're not going to have as many kids. It's not the only reason not to have kids, obviously. It's also true that as people become more focused on their own individual values, as people have more, again, the time, the wealth to focus on their individual values, the less interested they are, the more choices they have. And many of them choose not to have kids. All right, let's see. What are the high-paying questions? I just had one from Brad, another $100 question. Let us know if it's possible to donate towards a discussion between you and Jordan Peterson about morality. That's a dream of mine to witness. Your discussion with Jordan, Ruben, and Greg seemed to be cut short too soon. You saved me from Jordan's sacrificial ethics. Wow. Thank you, Brad. Wow. I'm so happy to hear that I had that impact on you. I don't know how to do that other than people writing to Jordan thoughtful emails or to somebody who close to Jordan, some way, find ways to get to Jordan, a thoughtful email saying, you should really consider having Yoram on the show to discuss his ideas, to discuss Ayn Rand, to discuss ethics, to discuss morality, the purpose of morality, happiness, you think that that conversation would be incredibly fruitful and valuable to the audience. And if you write it nicely, thoughtfully, not overly praising me or anything like that, but just this would be a conversation that you, Jordan, would, I think, enjoy and that your audience would enjoy. If you could write it in a way like that, then I think that's the way to get me on. I don't think it's about money. Jordan Peterson gets paid $100,000 a lecture. I don't think that can happen. I don't think it's about flooding his Twitter account because I don't think he pays attention to that. I think it's somehow getting it in writing in front of him or in a super chat. I don't know if he does super chat on the shows or in some way. He knows who I am if he remembers. He might not remember because we did that event together and we chatted a little bit before and a little bit after. But the only way to do it is to convince him to invite me, right? No other way to do it. But thank you, Brad, for thinking about that. And if anybody out there is excited about this, and I think you should be, I think that would be really exciting, write to him. All right, let's see. Let's do the $20 questions, but I want to do ones that are on topic. Let's see. Corey. Corey says, something I have noticed since being a part of this community is that when you talk about the critique the conservative rights ideas, there seems to be a lot more action in the chat and more super chats. Do you notice this? Definitely more action in the chat. I'm not sure about the super chat. That seemed, I haven't found a pattern. I need to maybe look harder for the pattern. But definitely more action in chat. And the more action in chat is when I criticize the left, everybody's like, yeah, we all agree on that. Nothing new here, Yoram. I mean, people get excited because they like to attack the left. They love it. But like, what am I adding to the fact that you guys already hate the left? And everybody on the chat is in agreement. There's no disagreement on the chat when I attack the left. Scott is on board, and Richard is on board, and all the people who love to attack me and love to argue and love to debate are all on board when I attack the left. When I attack the right, then there's real disagreement. Because a lot of the people who listen to Yoram Brooks show view themselves as part of the right. I don't. Think the right is much better than the left. I don't. And want to argue, want to defend, want to engage. And nobody on the Yoram Brooks show ever defends the left. So there's no discussion, there's no debate. But there is when I go after the right. So maybe that inspires more super chat. I don't, it's hard to tell. And look, a lot of you guys who are giving $100 today and in the last few weeks are relatively new to giving $100, right? So it's also interesting how there's a change and there's a pattern in who are the whales, who are the people giving $100 or more. And it's shifted. Some of you are been around for a long time. Adam's been here a long time in terms of giving a lot of money, and maybe some of you come and go. Adam's kind of come and gone. But some of you are relatively new, and there seems to be an ebb and flow to this. So I'm still trying to figure it out. But as I've said, I'm going to keep attacking the right and the left. But I consider my unique niche as attacking the right, because everybody on the right, I mean, there are plenty of people attacking the left from a relatively individualistic perspective. Almost nobody is worried about the new right. Almost nobody is worried about national conservatism. Almost nobody is attacking them regularly, consistently. Plus, the other thing is, if you believe that there are a lot of good people on the right, that the right is where we should be recruiting, if you will, then by attacking the bad right, I hope to attract the better people. Like Brad said, I saved him from Jordan Peterson. It was his virtues that led him to Jordan Peterson and to Jordan Peterson's morality. I mean, in a sense, that's the right. And I want those people, because I want people who are searching, who want guidance, who want a morality, who want something to live for. And then I want to be able to tell them, yeah, but what you think you want to live for is garbage. Come on over to where the really good ideas are. So, Corey's been here for a long time. He's been a big supporter of the show for a long time. Oh, I mean, we've only had, Super Chat has only been a major feature of the Yoram Brooks show since spring and really summer of 2020. So Super Chat is a phenomena of COVID. We didn't have Super Chat, $20, $30, $50. But to do $1,000 or even $500 a show for a while, we were doing 400. Now we're doing 600 every show. That is all post COVID. If you remember, There was one woman who, in the spring of last year, started giving $50 and $50 and $50, and that's what and doing matches, and that's what got you guys excited in the spring of 2020. So it's coming up in 2 years, but it's less than 2 years that we've been really doing this significantly. It's not inflation. Inflation has not been that big. The super chat has grown dramatically, out of this world. All right, let's see. Friend Harper says, a friend of mine who I asked question for on here, yes, you do, I noticed that, once posted, quote, if everyone on the planet decided to not have kids ever again, there wouldn't be a tomorrow. Nobody is obligated to have kids for any reason. Absolutely. Absolutely. The human race would go extinct if nobody had any kids anymore, but okay. The standard is not the human race. We are not driven by the desire of our genes to reproduce. We are driven by our reason, and we can make choices. And we're not living for the species. We are living for ourselves. Friend Harper says, I think your whales turn into monthly supporters and super chat less. Probably true. Although the monthly support has been fairly steady. It hasn't really grown that much. Super chat has grown a lot. Monthly support has been pretty constant for over a year now. Over a year. So for whatever that's worth. I don't know that a lot of the whales on here become monthly supporters. Many of them are both. Many of them are both. Many of you are both. Okay, let's just jump in with a variety of $20 questions. Let me just clean this up a little bit. All right, Michael asked, do you think people make their lives more stressful and neurotic than they actually are through negative self-talk? Yes, no question. If most people honestly, objectively analyze their own situation in reality, they live good and easy lives. Yes, I think people generally make their lives harder, more stressful by adopting a certain malevolent view of life, by focusing on the negative, by focusing on the problems. Very difficult for a lot of people to step back and get a picture of your life, of how it's going, of all the good in your life in spite of the challenges and the struggles you might be experiencing. People are not good at that, but that's the kind of thing that reason helps you with. It gives you perspective, gives you context, it encourages you to look wide, not look narrow, just at the problems, but to look wide at life and the problems within the wider context. So absolutely, Michael. All right, let's see, Dean or Pupik. Hey, Yoram, I haven't been here for a while. I've seen a part of your show about Russia, and I was left with a question. Should a country go to war against atrocities of one country against another, even if that aggressive country is not an immediate threat to us? Was the U.S. right for not acting when Hitler made aggressive acts before World War II? Isn't that similar to Putin acts these days? Isn't it long-term thinking to act now against Putin? Thank you much. No, I don't think the United States should have acted against Hitler early. The British should have. The French should have. The Europeans should have, because Hitler was a direct threat to them. But I don't think Putin's a direct threat to the United States. I'll say I don't think Putin is a direct threat to the United States. Russia is a poor country, has technology that lags, has a lot of smart people that if we were smart, we would seduce to come over to our side by giving them visas. Putin's not going to launch a nuclear war against the United States. Russia doesn't border the U.S. except in Alaska, but nobody's going to engage in warfare in Alaska. Russia's far away and irrelevant from a security perspective to the United States. Russia's a real threat to Germany, and to France, and to Poland, and Scandinavia. And they should all unite, and they should be a united front against Russia. Europe is rich. We, the United States, needs to stop bailing out Europe. I mean, one of the few things that Trump said that he was right in is Europe doesn't pay enough for its own defense. Why are we defending it? Now, I don't think he went far enough. We should leave NATO and make NATO European. I mean, luckily the United States exists in North America. It has no threats on its borders. I like the Monroe Doctrine. Don't mess with Americas. But if you want to screw around in Europe, if you want to kill each other in Europe, if you want to go to war, I mean, the biggest mistake America ever made from a war perspective was joining World War I. Why did we do that? Why did tens of thousands of American kids die? For whom and for what? If a Holocaust happens, yes, you stand put. You stand idle. It's not your responsibility. You want to volunteer to go stop a Holocaust? You can volunteer. But it's not America's job to stop the Nazis from killing Jews. And by the way, if you're going to go there, then should the United States gone into Rwanda and stopped the Houthis and Tutsis fighting? And what counts as a Holocaust? How many thousands need to die? Tens of thousands? Hundreds of thousands? Millions? Only when it's millions do you intervene? What if 2 people are killed? There's no threshold. Do you do it everywhere? Only in Europe because you have an affinity for Europe and they're white? Or do you do it in Africa? Do you do it in Asia? What about all the Chinese people who are being enslaved by their own government? Should we go into China and free them? They're concentration camps where they're doing horrible things to Muslims. Should we go to war with China to free the Muslims in Western China? Where does it stop? What's the standard? What's the principle involved? The principle is clear-cut. You do not go to war unless you are directly threatened. The lives of Americans and a significant amount of their property is threatened. And don't tell me, oh, I've got a bank account in Ukraine, so my property is threatened. Then don't have a bank account in Ukraine. It's not the job of the United States to protect every piece of property you have as an individual anywhere in the world. Some, like oil, because oil is such a strategic asset, yes. The United States should not have allowed Middle Eastern countries to confiscate, steal the oil of private companies. But it can't do that for every piece of private property. It has to decide what is strategic and what is important. So, this is what egoism means in foreign policy. It might be unpleasant for many of you because it means standing put and watching people die. But it's altruism that is tugging at you to get you to be involved. Not America's job. Now, I believe strongly, it's not just a minor belief, big belief, that a proud America, a strong America, a free America, an America that knows its value, that understands the principles that guide it, is an America that truly becomes a shining city on a hill. And when you have a shining city on a hill, an example, a model of human greatness, of human achievement, of great human well-being, and the ideas are being emanated out from that place, then genocides will stop. People all over the world will want to mimic you, will want to be your friends, will want to try to do the best to change and become you. The reason authoritarianism is rising all over the world today is because of American weakness, not American military weakness, we're strongest power in the world ever. But because America's ideological weakness. We are not a shining city on the hill. We are not protecting our own values. We are not articulating the case for our morality, for our political system, for our values, which are universal. We are pathetic, cowardly, mealy-mouthed, groveling. Our foreign policy is absurd, ridiculous, from everybody after Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan at least gave a good speech. But from Bush Sr. to Clinton to Bush, oh my God, Bush Jr., what a mealy-mouthed wimp. To Obama, who believed that America was no different than the rest of the world. To Trump, who groveled before the brutal dictator of North Korea and before Putin. To Biden, who's just a nothing, a zero. Yeah, of course, authoritarians around the world are rising, asserting themselves. And of course, the people around the world are not inspired by liberty because there's nobody to be inspired from. All right, that was a rant. All right, $20 question. Michael asked, what is certain? This is a book. This is a book. This is a bottle of water, plastic bottle of water. Feed it. I am certain of it. You might have a very high probability, but you know, I'm certain of it. You're watching me on Zoom. All of that, that's certain. Evidence of the senses is certain. Ideas that you can bring back to the evidence of the senses, that you can prove, that's certain. What is perfect? This is perfect. Perfect water. What is objective? That which corresponds to reality, to corresponds between your consciousness and reality. Those are big questions for a Q&A. OMG puppies. Mathis seems to inspire dark ideas. Today, it animates things like Extinction Rebellion. Hitler, see chapter 4 of Mein Kampf, used Malthus to conclude that Germany had to prepare itself to be the winner in the Malthusian endgame. I haven't read Mein Kampf. I can't quite bring myself to doing that. So thank you for educating, for providing me with that information, knowledge. Yes, any view of man, any view of nature, any view of the world is zero-sum. Any view of ideology, of ethnicity, of culture that is zero-sum is going to lead to disaster. And it leads to nationalism, ethnocentrism, focus on birth rates, and ultimately to racism, which is what most of those things lead to. Adam says the right is becoming what they fear. Putin. Yeah, the right is becoming Putin. The right admires Putin. The right adores Putin. Putin and Orban are the two favorite political leaders of the right, although they secretly also love Xi in China because he's getting away with, he's breaking up big tech. It's like the dream of the American right is to break up big tech, and Xi in China is doing it. All right, let's see. Who else do we have here? All right, Hugh, 20 Australian dollars. Any thoughts on Alexander Dugin? He's an influential Russian philosopher gaining some popularity on the right. His project is creating an alternative to liberalism, communism, and fascism based on Heidegger and postmodernism. God, yeah, I've listened to a little bit of Dugin. I mean, he's terrible. Oh, he's kind of the worst of combining the left and the right. I mean, ultimately, he's a kind of socialist fascist. but a subjectivist, that's this postmodernism, a complete nationalist. So each nation has its own values and its own criteria. And yes, I think the right is very influenced by him. And it's funny because you'd expect the right, the kind of nationalist right in America to be anti-postmodern. But just like sometimes Jordan Peterson becomes postmodern. Postmodernism has really affected across the board the way people think philosophically, and it's really affected the right. It's really affected the right. So I'm not an expert on Dugin, but yes, he's a very, very dangerous guy, very, very dangerous ideologue, very influential on the American right, on the right in Europe and in America. Super nationalistic, super ethnocentric, and very, very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. All right, the non-$20 questions. Let's do these. King Prince asked, the frequency of tribalism and nationalism in group preference through human history shows it is a successful strategy. A group is stronger than an individual. Thoughts, geopolitical realism. That's completely false. It's exact opposite. That is, the more tribal and nationalistic a culture is, the more it fails, the more it stagnates, the more it declines. Human population growth, human wealth growth, human well-being growth is a feature of relatively individualistic societies. Societies that reject the tribe. Societies that reject nationalism. Think the Roman Empire. Think ancient Greece. Think the Industrial Revolution. Think America of the 19th century. So, tribalism is stagnation. Nationalism as an ism, as the individual subservient to, the whole in-group preference idea in history is a recipe for stagnation or decline. Look at Jews. Jews are a perfect example of this. They have an in-group preference, and as a people they have stagnated, except in places and at times historically where they've assimilated and broken away from their in-group preference. Like in America, Jews have done very, very well because they're willing to live out their individualism. And Israel is doing well to the extent that it is becoming a more and more individualistic society. And less tribal, less and less authoritarian, less and less even nationalistic. In-group is a bad thing. The evils that cause stagnation. What brings about growth, what brings about prosperity, what brings about success is when in-group preference is rejected. When the Irish and the Southern Italians and the Eastern European Jews and the Chinese and Mexican immigrate to a country that respects them as individuals, leaves them alone as individuals, allows them to prosper as individuals. And as we descend now into in-group preference, in other words, racism, we will stagnate and decline, as always happens. The in-group preference of Germans has led to Nazism, which was incredibly destructive for Germany. It was bad for Germany. Linda, thank you for the support. Really appreciate it. The in-group preference of, I don't know, any group, it's a sign of decay and decline. So no, I completely disagree with the premise, and I think it's historically incorrect and wrong. And I would even argue that in ancient history, it was the cultures that were willing to mix, that were willing to trade, that were willing to engage with one another, that were willing to integrate, that were the most successful. It was the Indo-Europeans who were willing to leave and spread out and go to new places and assimilate or integrate into new cultures and new things and abandon their ancient language into a new language that had that ancient influence. I mean, the idea that human history is the history of successful tribes is nuts. It's completely ahistorical. The idea that in-group preferences is an advantage is completely wrong. It gives you no advantage. It ultimately leads to stagnation and decline and death. No, King Prince says, why are you ducking the Super Chat question on nationalism? I don't duck questions. I just take them in the order that I define in advance, which is the people who, first I take the questions at the end, not at the beginning. And secondly, I answer questions based on the dollar amount associated with them. So, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of this tribalism going around. There's a lot of this worship of the tribe, worship of the group, in-group preferences. God forbid. I mean, think about Rome. It was the assimilation of all those cultures into Rome that was Rome's success. Japan, oh, thank you, Jennifer. Japan was so much better when they opened up. And Japan is struggling today because it is so tribal. Because it's a great example of an island which does not admit immigrants, although it's opening up now to immigrants because they have to, which has very, very low birth rates. And it's in decline. It's stagnated for a long time. It's finally starting to open up to immigrants. But no, it's exact opposite. It's open cultures. It's open cultures that are successful. Immigration is now a disaster because we are unwilling to assimilate immigrants. We're unwilling to stand up for our culture. We're unwilling to defend Western civilization. Immigration in and of itself is a huge success. Even in America today, where assimilation is less important than Europe, immigration is still a massive success in America. Massive success. And indeed, one of the biggest problems we have in America today is not enough immigrants. America should have a lot more immigrants. Immigrants who commit crime should go to jail, just like everybody else who commits a crime. So no, I don't believe in in-group preferences. But taking the natives' women is not in-group preferences. It's a preference for having babies with somebody outside of the group, right? And then assimilating those people into your culture, which is fine. But funny how the culture in northern India and the culture in Germany are so different, even though their source is the same people who started on the plains. That one tribe has resulted in all these different cultures. Why? Because they moved. They adopted new ideas. They adopted new geographies. They left their ancient homeland. They diversified. They went all places. They married. They traded. They exported. They imported. They changed. They were not stagnant. They didn't have in-group preferences. In-group preferences are the death of you. And it's hard for me to, it really, I think the most shocking thing that I've discovered in the last, 10 years, is the extent of racism on the left and the right. And I consider in-group preferences racism, pure and simple. That this is an issue, that anybody cares. We're in the 21st century, and people still think that they should stick with people who come from the same ancient gene pool as they do. I mean, that's barbarism at its worst. And we're in the 21st century. And we know history. We know what's happened. Shazbot asked, do you know where I can get rid of metal ice cream scoop? The one I have broke. If I told you, I'd have to kill you. Sorry, Shazbot. It's just the reality. Secrets are secrets. Bash Brannigan. Is China a safe place for Chinese businessmen and entrepreneurs? Not anymore. No. And particularly not if you're successful. Or if you get on the bad side of some communist official. In some extent, it never has been. But it certainly isn't today, and it's getting worse. So no, China's not a safe place for Chinese business and entrepreneurs. But you could argue neither is anywhere, but China in particular. It's authoritarian, and the politicians have a lot of power. Friend Harper is impressed by my sense of humor, it looks like. You didn't know I had one. I know. Talk about Friend Harper. Here's a question from him. Ever give anyone thought into holding raffles using super chats? And you get what in exchange? What would be the prizes for the raffle? What would be the prizes? Jennifer says, even in biology, inbreeding is not a good thing. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for the support, Jennifer. Ethnocentric nepotism is a failed strategy. It is a disastrous strategy. It didn't lead to the Industrial Revolution. It didn't lead to America. It didn't lead to success anywhere. It is a strategy of stagnation. And again, every successful civilization, from Greece to Rome to the West to America, has been an open civilization. There were no visas to travel. You didn't need visas in the 19th century to travel between countries experiencing the Industrial Revolution. It's not an accident that you had an Industrial Revolution. It's not an accident you had the greatest creation of wealth in human history. In a time of the most open. Industrial Revolution nations were not nationalistic. People could travel across the borders with no problems, no passports, no visas required. And the country that was, and they brought in people from overseas. America was not nationalistic. And the people who succeeded in America were not of the same families or the same inbred or the same ethnocentric. But if you want to be ethnocentric, if you want to marry somebody from your own little clan, then, fine. It's pathetic, super pathetic in my view. But so be it. Yeah, a lot of immigrants couldn't cut it because they were too tribal for individualistic America, and they went back to their homeland. All right, let's see. Someone should tell Hazony that human beings are not naturally tribal. Cowards are naturally tribal. Agree. Agree. People are not naturally tribal. They're naturally thinkers if they choose. Is Hazony more dangerous than Richard Wolff or Paul Krugman? Well, he could become, or I don't think he is individually because he's Jewish. I don't think Jews are going to be very powerful within the national conservative movement. They're going to be replaced by the Catholics. You know, the new right is not going to tolerate being led by Jews. Hazony himself is not. I think the ideas of the new right are more dangerous, certainly than Richard Wolff and Paul Krugman. Israel survives because it has a right-wing nationalistic siege mentality. That's fascinating because Israel was founded by left-wing atheists, who former communists, certainly socialists. It fought all of its major wars, every single one of its major wars, as a leftist socialist country, and won. The right wing has only become prominent in Israel recently, in the last few decades. Israel did, you know, in terms of survival, Israel did its major battles, war victories, were done when they were leftists. Frank says, in fearing the right, I hear no mention of the John Birch Society. What is it? Were early objectivists ever in competition with them? Are they active today? I don't know much about the John Birch Society. I don't think they're very big today. They were quite big in the 1950s and 60s. They were big in all kinds of communist conspiracies. William F. Buckley made a real point in the 1950s of kicking out of the conservative movement two groups, the John Birch Society and the Objectivists. And unfortunately, the mentality of the John Birch Society is now capturing the Republican Party and becoming a dominant part of the right. Unfortunately, that never happened with Ayn Rand. Just as an aside, Israel was founded by leftists who left. I mean, this is history. You can go check this out. Ben-Gurion and the rest of the founders of Israel were leftists who thought that their project was not being reflected properly in Russia before the Soviet Union, and then did not feel at home with the Soviet Union. And they left Israel in order to found a socialist utopia. That was the primary project. And then it was established around this idea of a Jewish homeland. And yes, Israel is nationalistic. And, you know, ultimately, to the extent that it becomes more nationalistic, to the extent that the religious right in Israel dominates more, to that extent, Israel will stagnate. The beauty of Israel, the reason Israel has done so well, is that even though you can look at it and say they're all Jews, therefore they're all the same nation, in Israel, you don't think of it in that sense. There's very little in common between a Jew from Germany, who maybe lived in Berlin, a Jew from a little shtetl in Russia, a Jew from a city in Morocco, a Jew from a little town in Yemen, a Jew from Ethiopia, a wealthy Jew from Iraq, from Baghdad. All these people with all these completely different culture, completely different views. They all came to Israel, and in the beginning, they all stayed in group. And, the Moroccans married the Moroccans, and the Germans married the Germans, and the Iraqis married the Iraqis. And Israel has become a success as that has broken down. Even Israel, it shows you that in-group preferences are stagnating. So when the Moroccans and the Germans started to get married, and the Germans and the Yemenites started to get married, and the Russians and the Moroccans started, or the Iraqis started to get married, that's when Israel thrived. So it's when Israel abandoned the in-group preferences. I mean, the idea that Moroccan Jews and German Jews are the same group is bizarre. It shows you know nothing about Israel, you know nothing about these groups, and you know nothing about their history. In-group preferences lead to stagnation. I'll say that again. And you won't find an example in history where that is not true. The more pure you are, the more pure you insist on ethnic, tribal, racial identity, the more you will stagnate. They're all still Jews, so what? The Jewishness, you can't even recognize the services of some Sephardic synagogues and some Ashkenazi synagogues. You don't get to decide what the group is. When the culture is different, skin color is different, the history is different, the ceremonies are different, the language is different. The fact that they all come from some 2,000 years ago, same ancestors, that doesn't make them in the same group. For 2,000 years, they've lived apart. They're not the same group. The only reason they're all considered Jews and Israel is necessary is because other people think of them as Jews. If other people didn't think of Jews as Jews, if other people didn't discriminate against Jews because they were Jews, there would be no Israel. Travis, thank you. I appreciate you giving value for value. Scott says, I like Lex, but his view of Ayn Rand seems to be that she is material cold-hearted. I see her view on love as full meaning and warmth, and his view of unconditional love is empty and cold. Scott, I agree with you completely. And I agree completely. Cobb says, you should get an objective scientist on Lex show to talk with Don Hoffman. Yeah, or just talk about Don Hoffman. Yes, I think a debate with Don Hoffman would be really, really good. A scientist or an epistemologist. Don Hoffman is so wrong, and he's so Kantian, and he's so unoriginal. He's just Kant stirred over, pretending. Ari Bushtin says, I am an Israeli with Ukrainian Latvian roots. My Israeli wife has Iraqi Moroccan roots. We fell in love because of our morals. Yeah, my roots are in 75% Lithuania, 25% Poland. My wife's roots are 50% Morocco, 50% Uzbekistan. In group, when my wife's mother and my wife's father married, they were in group. If you look at my genome and you look at their genome, very different. Very different culture, very different. Gotta run. Quick note to let you know, I emailed you about a show sponsorship. Thanks, Yoram. I saw the email. I'll get back to you. Thank you. Friend Harper says, and this is the last Super Chat question, prizes like 30-minute screen time with you or signed books or Ocon tickets with how much you might get from it. The idea pays for itself. All right. I like it. All right. I'm putting on the list. Putting on the list. Any one of these just takes organization, but yes, thank you. All right, $1,179. That's quite a take. Thanks, guys. Really, really, really appreciate your support. That is a real vote of confidence in what we do here at the Yoram Brook Show. And of course, that and you and all the Super Chat questions and all you participants on the chat make this fun for me to do and make this interesting. So thank you, and I will see you all on Tuesday, and then Wednesday I'm going to Miami for a week, and then we'll see. I'll try to do stuff from the road while I'm getting. I missed your $20 question. Well, if I did, I deleted it, so it's gone. What was it? Can you put in the chat right now what the $20 question was? Because somehow I deleted it by accident. Where is the $20 question? Just put it up in the chat. Doesn't have to be a super chat. $20 question from Steven. Steven, we'll get there, guys. Have some patience. You know, we're going to have to teach you guys some history lessons and also about Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews and, you know, who contributed to what. There's a lot of mythology out there. A lot of mythology. A lot of mythology. All right, I don't see it. I don't see the question from Stephen Petit. So you're going to have to do it in a future show. Just remind me that you put $20 in and just do it for $2 or $1 or whatever, and I'll answer it. My view is not naive. My view is factual. My view is factual. Your view is suicidal and destructive. Your in-group breeding nonsense is the most destructive idea I can think of in terms of where the world could go. And it's to have such primitive view of the world in the 21st century is very discouraging. Time filler for that $20 question. Song recommendation: Be Strong and Hot Stuff. God, really? There's a song with that title, Be Strong and Hot Stuff by Jeff Williams? I don't know, friend Hopper. I don't know. All right. I'm copying and pasting it. I'll have to do something with that. Not sure what I'll do with it. All right. I don't see Stephen Pettit, so we'll just have to take it up next time. Thanks, guys. Sorry, Stephen, that I missed your question. Oh, there it is. If there ever was a good Atlas Shrugged movie or miniseries, would you want to be consulted over the script, director, casting? Do you imagine any particular actors for certain characters? Yeah, I wouldn't mind being consulted. I'm not an expert, so for whatever it's worth, I'm not a movie maker. I'm not an expert on the aesthetics of movies, but I have a lot of opinions and I know a lot about movies. So I would like to be consulted, only if it's super talented people who really want to make a good Atlas Shrugged movie. Any particular actors for certain characters? No. I mean, I can't even think in those terms. I'm not a good visual thinker. No. I don't know. and all the young actors today who would play those roles, I don't even know who they are. Like John Hamm as Hank Reardon. He's too old now. John Hamm 10 years ago, yeah, would make a great Reardon, but I'm not sure he would today. So age is an issue. Age is an issue. And I don't know the younger actors, like the actors in their 30s and 40s today. I don't know who they are. I don't know their names. I see them on TV. I like them or don't like them, but I don't know their names. And I don't, you know me with names. I don't retain them anyway. Never mind new ones. All right, we're at 2 hours. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all on